Welcome back to Data Sources 1, Part 3, dealing with sources of data. In my online recordings, I tend to go on a little bit longer about things than I would in an in-person session. And this particular segment, I'm just going to talk about many different data sources. So please feel free to kind of zoom in, fast forward, or focus in on the parts that are of most interest to you. But I will say a little bit about everything linked on this page so that you get a flavor for these major data sources. But I will not say a lot about any of these sources because that would really be a totally different kind of presentation. Each one of these major sources rewards a lot of digging in and really studying and learning about it. So when you find one that meets your needs, just go ahead and jump in to learn the details. So we're going to talk about sources of data for the United States by category, starting with the federal government, right? Because the federal government is a massive provider of data. They obviously cover the entire country, and they can do things that others cannot. They can force people to comply. Things like the Internal Revenue Service, the Social Security Administration, or ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, interact with people, and right, we have to file our taxes. We have to, if we're immigrating, we deal with ICE. If we are retirees or just earning money, we deal with Social Security. And therefore, government agencies collect a lot of information about people. So they're one of these sources that you can go to when you have a question that says, I really need to know what everyone is doing. And so when you visit a government site of this type, you will typically find, if you look around, and I've linked you to these for the three that I've just pulled up, a statistics or a data page. Just look around on the agency site for search for where they have data and statistics and reports, because they do produce really useful summary information on, IRS, like how much tax is collected, what kind of reported income do they see coming in on the tax forms. They have the information, and they report on it. And you can see here state, county, zip code data, all kinds of things. Let's just get one little table. Well, I don't want to open up, spend my time opening up apps and things. You can click on these things and figure them out. But you can see there's state income and tax data, and many other breakdowns here. That's IRS. Social Security reports monthly statistics, things about earnings, right? They're getting feeds of people's earning information, wage earning coming in constantly. We'll talk a little bit about the role of these administrative agencies in restricted data in part 4 as well. Keep that in mind. And things like immigration, right? So something currently heavily in the news, but if you want actual numbers on what is happening, you'll see that they have their own version of reporting, where you can do things like filter by country, see what kinds of things are going on, arrests, deportations, detentions, all the current statistics from the source. And there are many agencies. Obviously, we're just even giving a highlight here. So I want to mention, again, this is recorded in April 2025, that we're seeing, as the Trump administration has come in, many sources targeted for cuts. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, a source of a lot of climate data, is seeing programming being cut. Something like the National Center for Education Statistics, which collects the largest source of information for K through 12 and higher education data nationwide, has also experienced dramatic cuts. It's not quite clear how many of their various programs are going to be affected, but these are major data clearinghouses. They're really, like in the case of NCES, a place was created in order to enable educational research. As they say here, since 1867, reporting on the condition of U.S. education. These sites also have, their data section where you can go in and look at the data tools that are available online. Again, K through 12 and higher ed, these are places to go. I'm not really going to give a tutorial right in using any one of these resources because there's simply too much here. This is a general overview. Although I have to say I'm quite tempted to dig into iPads, that's the higher education data, and just show you everything you could get there. It's a fantastic resource. But given what's going on right now in April 2025, I want to highlight the Data Rescue Project. This is a project, a very important project that has spun up rapidly to deal with the crisis just since January 2025. And the Data Rescue Project has, among other things, a tracker that lets you see what has happened to various sources and where it might be backed up. So things that may have been taken down, what has happened to them, or things that may be under threat of takedown, where is there a secure backup? This is a crowdsourced volunteer project, many data librarians and professionals involved in it. So a really fantastic source to use, to know about. And connected to that, I would highlight, if you look at that backups list, you'll see many things are backed up in the Data Lumos project. Data Lumos is hosted at ICPSR. We're going to talk about ICPSR in just a minute as a major data archive, but Data Lumos allows individuals to identify, here's some government data that we'd like to make sure you have a copy of, and they will back that up using Data Lumos. So you can specifically search this archive. It's one of the, if not the most important place for safeguarding access to this kind of government data that even without the case of a crisis, there's this issue of, do data sources change over time? We alluded to that maybe the goals of a project change, and they decide to reformat how they're distributing things. Knowing where to go to get that archived version can be very important. Okay, so we looked at the kind of thinking about agencies as a source. I'm going to now highlight just a few of the places that are, I would call them just pure like statistical sources. So obviously, and I'll just open up these tabs and run through them relatively briefly. You may have heard of many of these before, but to set that baseline, um, I I do want to mention each of these. Um, Maybe in the future, we I may record some uh, deep dives into some of these sources. So I'm going to start with the original, right? The Bureau of the Census. Census obviously mandated in the Constitution, starting with the first census in 1790, to count the population of the United States, to find the proportions for our representatives, and to collect useful information for understanding what's going on in the United States. So the census has continued to do that ever since. The site data.census.gov is a place to go for uh, both rapid and detailed discovery of information, where you can just search for a topic or a place that you're looking for. You will discover many suggested sources which are relevance ranked, so that you can kind of focus on the most important ones or most widely used ones first. And you can use filters to zoom in on specific topics, specific places. Just again, I'm doing the super brief overview, but here's the demographic and housing estimates for New Jersey for the most recent year available. And you can see there's age, sex, race, ethnicity breakdowns here that are already quite detailed, even though this is one of the top level overview pages that Census provides. Census not only provides the census or that population data that you think of, but has many different programs. They study business, economic census, the survey of governments. They study government activity, and this page of census surveys lets you discover some of those other things that the census works on. Once again, because they are studying everything nationwide, and the census can use the force of law to say, you need to reply to this questionnaire that we're sending out. They can do things that are more complete than just, a smaller sample from other sources. So often the census is a baseline for setting what we know, and then other organizations can kind of build on top of that and ask additional questions or explore additional things. It's a very important program. So that's census. Bureau of Labor Statistics, as you might imagine, deals with labor-related issues and really kind of all kinds of economic issues, notably employment, unemployment rate, and consumer prices. These are probably the leading things that they are known for, although there's a lot more, right? And you can again go to the data tools and search in various ways. I will do in the future an additional session on using APIs to extract data from these sources, because most of your major government, U.S. government's statistical sources have APIs now, so that you can integrate, pull data on a regular basis into your statistical programs in a programmatic fashion. The API and application programming interface for programming purposes. And that's kind of changing how some of these things are available. But again, let me just show you the popular series. As I said, employment, unemployment, weekly hours, average earnings, various versions of price indexes to compute inflation. These are the frequent programs, right, where they're really looking and surveying constantly to update this information. But they also have special programs and special publications as well. One of those that's just as one example of something sort of interesting is the American Time Use Survey, which looks at how much time do people spend doing different things. So like, how much time did you spend doing housework versus commuting or other activities? There's actually a survey for that, and this is the most reliable long-term way to make long-term comparisons of those changes for the United States. Okay, let's turn to something more economic in a financial sense, which is FRED, the famous FRED, Federal Reserve Economic Data. This is a site that provides very concise and complete data series of interest to economists. And as you can see, it aggregates 114 sources to produce 825,000 series. So if you click in, and you can search for specific things, but you can click and filter for all kinds of stuff. And you can see the time series are quite long. They're generally as long as you can obtain reliable numbers, right? Here we have the federal funds rate, which is a baseline interest rate that affects interbank activity, and it goes back to 1954. I'm going to guess that if the Federal Reserve does not provide this rate prior to 1954, that it either doesn't exist or it's not reliable prior to that date. And you can control very precisely the type of intervals of display, the range of dates, and download all this data. So it's very fast, very complete. If you have any interest in economic data, this is basically essential. And I do want to point out the alternative to FRED is archival FRED, or ALFRED. And this is important for economists, maybe a little bit specialized for others, but it's the kind of thing, again, thinking about data sources. Economists are often interested in how do people react to an announcement. So if in January 2020 an announcement came out that said unemployment has jumped from 4% to 6%, markets react, people start doing things. One thing that's true about all of these economic series is that they get updated and corrected over time, because they're all based on survey information and stuff that's coming in pretty live and pretty frequently. So if the Federal Reserve later gets better information and they learn that actually, it wasn't 6%, it was 5.5% unemployment. That was the actual number in January 2020, but they announced that 4 months later. In FRED, you get the actual number, but in ALFRED, you get the number that was originally announced, right? Because for the reaction to announcements of information, what that original announcement was, even if it was a bit incorrect, is important. So ALFRED lets you retrieve basically that version of data. I won't go further on that, but that's something of interest to economists. In another dimension, if we look at criminal justice type of data, the FBI aggregates and collects. This is data that's originates like at all the local jurisdictions, cities and counties around the country, who are reporting their arrest figures and things like that. The FBI collects all that from the local sources and kind of aggregates them up. So there may be inconsistency, right? That some locations provide more detailed or more frequent updates on the crime. But if you want something comparable across the country, you need a place that will do that, and the FBI's sources do that. Now they have kind of reformatted this as a crime data explorer that lets you browse and visualize in a number of ways. You can dig in a little bit deeper and download. You may see referred to in many sources the uniform crime reports. The uniform crime reports are the traditional, the original title of this kind of information. So you can go and find the historical publications of the FBI as well. This is an example of data that, the names change, the presentation changes a bit over time. The Crime Data Explorer, as you can see, since 2019, that has been the primary way this has been formatted and pushed out, but it changed a little bit over time. And then finally, we're going to look at health. I already mentioned in part 2 the CDC Wonder Wonder, I don't have that off the top of my head what the acronym stands for. Wide-ranging online data for epidemiologic research, right? So mystifying why they wouldn't just stick with that as the title and abbreviate it as Wonder. I don't know. But CDC, Centers for Disease Control, obviously has a nationwide interest in tracking this information, and they are the place that has I would call it the first stop for these type of health statistics, right? So births, deaths, causes of death, even some environmental information, and again, you can dig in and get various series. You can download full data sets, and I won't go through the process, but again, this is government information that they do want you to sign off and say you're not going to do anything harmful with this data, essentially, because anytime you have personal information with geographic detail, right, you have this issue of identification, right? If I find there's just a handful of people who died from a particular cause of death in a certain county, it already gets a little bit sensitive, right? So there are quickly downloadable data sets here, but they do want you to abide by the terms of use. So those are just a few highlights, hardly exhaustive on federal data sources, and I'm going to close the federal data sources with a discussion of data.gov. Right, so data.gov is part of a nationwide, worldwide, really, movement for open data. That if data exists that can be studied and improve and make people's lives better, let's just release it and let's let the public use it. Let's let people come up with new uses for it. And so data.gov is the major portal where these data sets are made available. Now, these data sets are quite disparate. There are many. Since I was just talking about cause of death, I've just searched here for death. Um, and they come from all across the government. Like, the idea is that if a federal agency has a data set of any kind, they should just put a copy of it here, um, and let people discover it and use it. So you can see we have things ranging from road traffic injuries in the state of California, state of Connecticut drug-related deaths, COVID-19 deaths from the Department of Health and Human Services, um, all kinds of things, right? You want to be careful about what you're looking at as well. Like, as you can see that the COVID one that I just mentioned is no longer updated. Um, the data here is not presented in any sort of particular emphasis, right? When you go to an agency website, what they put on their front page and link to is probably, that's their current well-maintained data. The data.gov is a wonderful resource, but it's also just a kind of open dumping of data that you have to be on your guard about the currency, the validity, I would say not validity, but the applicability of a particular data set to your research. And you can use the filters. You can use the, let's just look at the recently added data on death. That may be a little different than the popular data. You can see, okay, yeah, there's some very specific things like volcanic eruption that has some relationship to death. It probably occurs in the description. Mouse ocular responses in spaceflight. So just to give you an idea that, you got all kinds of stuff in here, and it's up to you to extract and make sense of it. It's much better that this is available now than previously, when something like this would not be available. Okay, I think I'm going to break the sources video into the subsection parts. So I'm going to stop here, ending the federal government sources, and resume in the next part with New Jersey state data.